Welcome to the Deeks.ai podcast, where Wake Forest innovators unpack the real-world magic of artificial intelligence through candid conversations. I'm Michael Ferrari.
I'm Ryan Scholl.
Please join us as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming work across campus, one fascinating story at a time.
Carm Taglienti has the longest combination of titles of any guest we've had on the podcast. Not only is he the academic director of the new Masters of Artificial Intelligence Strategy and Innovation program in the School of Professional Studies, but he's also the Chief Technology Officer of Public Sector and Distinguished Engineer at Insight Enterprises, as well as an educator at many other well-known colleges and universities. He's an industry speaker and published author. Even though the MAIS program at Wake may be new, Carm is not new to AI or education. He's been in the tech industry since before most people knew what the @ symbol meant. He has a wealth of experience in artificial intelligence and machine learning and actually knew what AI stood for long before ChatGPT burst through the wall like the Kool-Aid man. And if that wasn't enough, he's been teaching in higher education for decades. So help us welcome the CTO by day and academician by night, or maybe the reverse.
So Carm, let's start a little bit with your background so we can set the stage. You have a very illustrious professional career, and then you've been teaching and you've been at different schools. Tell us a little bit about the professional career and why you made a little bit of the jump into the teaching.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So when I started early days, about 30 years ago, I was focused on computer science. So I really wanted to be a programmer way back when. I think many students these days may not consider that a particular path. But back then, I really wanted to be a programmer and sort of get into the software engineering field. And from there, I did exactly that. So I got my degree. I started working at a company called Raytheon. Then I decided to go back to grad school, got a degree in systems engineering because I felt like, oh, I should really be an engineer. So I got a systems engineering degree, focusing on just how systems work, which is really interesting. And one thing I probably should mention in this sort of background is that when I was majoring in computer science, I was studying, we called it data mining or algorithmic processing at the time. So I was actually learning AI techniques in my undergrad. You know, lo and behold, now 30 years later, it's really cool. So we'll get into that, I'm sure, as we go through our conversation. But then over time, I moved into consulting and started to focus on helping to solve problems like solutions and how to use particular types of technology to be able to solve real world complex problems. And came to realize that over time, it wasn't just the technical problems that needed to be solved. It was also the organizational problems, the adoption, the usage, because these were all human interaction systems at the end of the day. I mean, most things don't run autonomously. So that was something that really interested me in helping people to understand what technology does, how to use technology, and then how to apply it. And I started to get into, I was teaching classes at my company. The company was Task at the time, but I was teaching classes at the company on how to do things like program and, old school technologies like C++ and things like that. But generally, I started getting into this educational component. And then over time, I became an adjunct at a company that was looking to, at a college that was looking to create a program in data science because I was doing a lot of work in that space at the time. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. We spent a weekend actually devising what I would foresee as maybe one of the first data science programs I've seen. And they offered it as a synchronous course for students to be able to learn basic concepts and, sort of classical, these are algorithms, these are machine learning capabilities. This is how you can apply them to business, that kind of stuff. So it was really kind of cool from that perspective. And then I was like, wow, this is really cool to think about participating in this environment. And then they asked me, do you want to be an adjunct? And I was like, sure, why not? So I got into teaching from that perspective. And then later in my career, this is maybe 10 or plus years ago, maybe 12, I decided to get my doctorate in education because I was so enamored with education that I studied how can you apply technology to organizational transformation and adoption and what goes wrong. So really just understanding success and failure criteria for organizations as they adopt technology. So it's, sort of that's how I got into this educational area. But I'm still so deeply into AI, cognitive sciences, how people learn, what to learn. And it's for me, it's took me a long time to get here, but it's like the perfect career. I just love what I do every day, and it all just came together for me. It's great.
Well, that's always nice to hear when it is the perfect career and you
Right?
really like what you're doing. Yeah. And what's interesting is you were involved in the machine learning and really artificial intelligence before it became a buzzword. So you kind of had this background and you understood it. And it's, thank you for getting into the teaching so you can impart your
Yeah.
wisdom. So what was it about Wake Forest that attracted you? And like, why did you come to Wake?
Yeah. So the one of the problems that I saw over time. So I was at a at time I was consulting for a student loan company, and I was working with the business teams. The business teams were really, back in the day of data warehousing or days of data warehousing. I don't know if you remember this time, but in essence, in order to be able to get data out or to be able to, ask any questions of the data, you had to know SQL. And so SQL is a pretty complex language. Many people know it today. Some people still don't know it, but that's okay. I think
Hmm.
we've leapfrogged that at this point. But
Well, the AI can teach us that now.
Exactly. But what I did was I really helped a group of data analysts, financial analysts understand how to write SQL. And this is really just this model of, well, the people who really know things, the subject matter experts or the domain experts, were the ones that really needed to understand this, not the technical people. So then that was sort of this, initial foray into like how is it that we should really think about helping everybody understand how to leverage technology in order to provide useful services to our businesses, but also in our personal lives. So it's kind of cool. That's kind of originally how I got involved. Thought it was really beneficial for us.
I definitely want to focus on your academic career. You have a lot of great federal policy content out on the internet. So anybody who wants to hear you speak on federal policy, you have a different podcast. So we're going to focus on the academic side for the rest of our conversation. So can you tell us, explain to us really the details of the program that you're doing at the School of Professional Studies, and correct me on the name of it. I think it's the Masters of AI Strategy and Innovation,
That's
correct?
right. Yep.
Okay.
100%.
Talk to us about the details of that program.
Yeah. Let me start with, because I don't think I did this when I was going through my background, but I didn't quite tell you where I ended up. So today
Yeah.
I'm the CTO for a public sector team at Insight Enterprises. And so there, which is the policy comment that you made earlier, was that because it's public sector, I tend to focus on things that are related to how can state and local government, education, federal government understand how to apply, I'll call modern technology techniques. These days, it's been mostly AI. So there's really this really nice
Mhm.
confluence in the middle of all this. And the reason why I want to tell you that is because as we get into the construction of the program, there's really nice alignment between what the workforce needs to understand, and this is the workforce across any industry, public sector, commercial, doesn't really matter, and what our program offers. And so one of the things that I was really interested in was not to really train people to become engineers. And if you look at the program, you'll see this because it's really, part and parcel or in total alignment with Pro Humanitate, which is really what Wake Forest is, all about. And we really focus on learning as it relates to enabling people to become more well educated, to sort of realize their own personal and professional objectives. And so when I looked at AI in that from that perspective, I said to myself, well, do I really want to teach people to be technologists like I know how to do? Do I need to teach them algorithms? Do I need to go back to the linear algebra and teach you, how to code an algorithm? I was like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And now in the era of AI, which is when we started, so I've been enrolled for a little over a year or so when we first started the program. And we had the opportunity to then leverage some of the capabilities. So it's like, let's start with vibe coding and not really have to worry too much about understanding exactly the specifics of coding, but still enable people to be, executable or execution centric. So you can do something with it. Like if you're a Claude Code fan or whatever, you can create actual working systems without necessarily having to be a coder. So that was one
So
of our
it's more
major
about
focuses.
understanding the applications and applied AI
Yes,
than the theory behind how a neural network works and
100%,
understanding, the really nuts and bolts of a transformer architecture.
100%. And when
Okay.
I talk to my students that are coming in, they tell me why they picked the program, and that is usually one of the top 5 reasons of why they've done it. And some of the other ones are just who we are and our reputation and alumni, et cetera, et cetera. But if we compare against the Stanford or an MIT or something like that, then we end up, they look at it from the perspective of I don't have to become a mathematician or a data scientist to be able to understand AI strategy and innovation and really make a difference within my organization. And that's how we focus.
So what kind of students are attracted to this program?
We get a huge dichotomy of students. So we get, people that are coming from, government jobs, which are state and local government or federal, and we get people that are coming from product companies. Like we have somebody from NVIDIA, we have somebody or people coming from Amazon, from financial institutions, like I said, state and local government. And the interesting thing about it is that we were trying to create sort of a regionalized program. I mean, literally last night I was on an introductory call with new students that are coming in, and they're in California, they're in Texas, they're in Maine, they're all over the place, and it's like, this is really kind of cool. So it's sort of really taking off because I think of the characteristics of the program not being like every other program that you can get everywhere else. So I think that's unique.
That is fascinating. And I mean, basically, I think you've just described a very original program. It's something that makes it unique. So there are not a lot of other programs like this out there. So I think that's pretty cool.
Totally.
All right. So you've had your feet in both worlds, in the industry, out in industry and in academia for a while. And if we think about the differences, there's kind of like a super collider where a lot of times academia wrestles with how to use artificial intelligence and the proper ways to use it. So I guess one of my first questions is, how can we use AI to better help students learn? And as a precursor to that, I need you to define the word learn for me.
Right. So all right, so let me define learn. And I go by the definition of learning becoming understanding. So learning is being exposed to a particular topic or subject area, and then being able to understand that subject or topic area, and then to be able to use it. And so when I think about and I'll focus on understanding because that's really sort of where my definition comes into play, but it's more understanding really means that if I have a conversation with you or present a problem to you, you can explain to me the concepts of what it is that you would have learned, or the theory or the practice that you would have been enabled to understand, and use that to be able to form it to a very explainable solution. So if you can tell me how to solve a problem by using the concepts that you would have learned, then I really understand that you know the topic area. So I tend to focus on that piece of it. And the reason I like that is because not only does it become something where it's more, I can expose to you a non-rigid style environment and figure out if you can extrapolate into the domain that I'm asking you. So, which is kind of true understanding as well. Like if you know a topic, and I ask you something that's not quite like what you've seen before, kind of like your physics professor, right, asking you questions, and you're like, that's not like the one in the book. It's just slightly different. Well, that's the same thing. But we also have to wrestle with the fact that today people do have AI. They have, chatbots and whatever else they might be able to use. So if I ask you to write it on a piece of paper or submit it as a Word document, I'm not really convinced that you're going to do that without using AI to be able to do it. So I don't know that you actually do understand. So in my mind, the more we can get toward really, the true expression of understanding, that's how I would love to define learning. Now, I don't think we're quite there yet. I actually saw a few tools very recently that really have this sort of speech-based interaction with an agent that focus on sort of multi-stage problem solution, and the student explaining how those problems would be solved over time. And then, they're very specific to maybe the course learning objectives and understanding of what it is that you would need to know in order to master a topic. So
is that a back and
I
forth
think we're getting
between
there.
the student and the agent?
100%. Yeah, that's exactly what
Okay.
it is. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it's guided. We have to be a little bit careful not that it
Of
doesn't,
course.
hallucinate off into some pathway. But I think we'll start to see things like that in the future.
And so, just to really hammer the point in, learning for you is more understanding, not just executing. So it's different than me trying to fix my leaky faucet and I watch a YouTube video and I learn how to tighten this pipe, right? That's it. Yeah, I learned how to fix it, but no, I did it once, I executed, and I didn't really get the deep understanding of why it was happening. Where you're talking about that deep knowledge where a plumber knows exactly what's going on and comes in and fixes it and really understands the concepts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll give you maybe a quick kind of fun example. Well, maybe two, but one is that if you look at a YouTube video and then you say, I think I got it, I know exactly what I'm doing. But then you might be an experiential learner, so you might then get under the sink and start working with it, and you're like, oh geez, I watched the video, how come nothing's working the way I expected it to? Well, because it's not the
Because that
exact
never
same.
happens.
Right, it's not the exact same environment. So now you end up with this model where you have to try things. So it's trial, failure, experiential learning now becomes the model. So so most people learn that way. So it's sort of I
Mhm.
think I understand it, I'm going to try it, didn't quite work the way, and I'm going to do sort of iterative self-improvement in order to truly learn. Some people can do simulation learning, for example. So like when I was young, my brother was we had a little motocross bike, and my brother was like, I can't let you ride until you know how to shift. So he basically told me what to do, and I just I sort of did error shifting of motorcycle, and I practiced and practiced and practiced just sort of without actually doing it. When I got on the bike for the first time, no problem, I knew exactly what I was doing. So it's not driving it, the shifting part, that is, it wasn't magical from that perspective. But so I was like more of a, the simulation in, being able to simulate and understand really did work for me. And some people learn that way. So I think we also have to really focus on, and I think we can finally get to the point where with AI techniques, we can probably get to the point where people are, if you're a visual learner, here's visual learning. If you're a textual learner, textual learning. If you're an experiential learner, here's experiential learning. So I think students can interact with whatever modality is most beneficial for them, or that they're most comfortable with. I think that would be also a very interesting way to look at it.
And with that simulation you were talking about, there's a lot of practice. But when you use artificial intelligence, does that threaten the cognitive struggle? Because as a lot of educators talk about, the cognitive struggle is what really makes learning. And
Mm.
we want that cognitive struggle, but does artificial intelligence make it too easy, or is there a way to harness the power of that to still allow the students to struggle?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I do think that we have to not necessarily generate the struggle, but I think produce the mechanism for learning that is most appropriate. And in many cases, maybe it is a struggle for people, but I think that I'll call it the cognitive dissonance is what we're after to an extent. So it's sort of if you don't understand a concept, then I need to either have you struggle to explain it, or I need to tell you that this is the reason, or here is the rationale, and then expect you to be able to assimilate it and then produce it for me, which is part of that process, I think, that you're describing overall. I do think that as a community of educators, Wake included, of course, and we look at it from our perspective, but clearly it's across the entire educational discipline, is that we need to make sure that we can understand how students learn, and to be able to provide the mechanisms for learning that work the best for them, without allowing too much, cutting of the corner, if you will. But I
Hmm.
also think that we have to get to the point at some time where we understand which things should be taught. Like, I'm a big fan of critical thinking. You and I talked about this, I know, when we were prepping for this call, where it's like, or for this podcast, where it was one of the things that it's like, critical thinking is super important, because then I can extrapolate that into any world, into anything. But we have to be very careful about, if I'm teaching you things that you may never use ever, it's like, my differential equations professor is like, I've never used that. So, and I'm just kidding a little bit, tongue in cheek. But those are the kinds of things where we really want to make sure that the things that we do learn, you can at least see line of sight into, will I use this in the future? And does it make sense to me? And is this something I can carry forward in my, I'll call it my arsenal of knowledge? And that's kind of, I think, what we have to do better as educators to make sure that people are learning things, because we know that it will prepare them for a future where AI may do a lot of the mundane tasks, but we still have to understand why things have happened, or exactly what is going on or what it's doing, and not just, take the lazy route and let AI do everything for us, because then, the dystopian future starts to at least become more realistic.
Well, and we don't want to smooth out the bumps. We still want that friction.
Yep.
Um, Now, I know that you are a marathon runner. You've done
At
a
one point,
bunch of
it's a long
a
time
bunch of
ago, but yes,
marathons, right? So
yes.
the one of the most overused but still incredibly relevant phrases that people love to use when we talk about artificial intelligence in learning, especially, is it's about the process, not the product. So
Mhm.
I mean, if the finish line was the goal, wouldn't it just be easier to take one of those moving walkways or jump on a bike or hop in a car to get to the end of the marathon? Like, why go through the struggle? I mean, you basically equate running a marathon with learning, and I mean, there's all the glory on, when you cross the finish line, but the real gains come from those Saturday runs when you're out there for 3 hours.
Yeah. No, you're right. It is, that's a really good, I guess, metaphor for learning. I mean, it is love of learning, right? So why would I want to go down the process? So, you know, if we talk to a cognitive scientist, a neuroscientist, they would tell us that, we have certain innate capabilities that are part of the encoding in our DNA for how the brain works initially. That's it. We just have a bunch of basic rules. If you don't develop those rules, or if you don't develop the characteristics and exposure to certain conditions, and your brain doesn't really just sort of learn as we go, then, like if we put you in a Skinner box most of your life, you would have zero social skills. You wouldn't really understand how to communicate, because that's not something we're born with. So it, really has to do with, as a species, it's sort of the experience of our environment, and then the ability to be able to succeed in our environment that drives us. And for many of us, in society as it's orchestrated today, it's about, learning things that provide value. Providing value should be a very pleasurable characteristic. So, like for me, I love to learn, so the process is really important to me. um, the fact that I might know a whole bunch of equations, or if I learn them by just being able to recite the equations, doesn't really matter. But if I know how they were derived, how they're used, that is what I'm after. That's exciting to me. So I think that passion is something that either we have to instill in our students, or our children, or our grandchildren, as the case may be. But I think it is just part of human nature, honestly, or I think we have to make sure that it's part of human nature. We can't relegate our species. And again, I don't want to get too way off in the esoteric world, but 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 it's a really good question, because it's like, if the goal was really just to get to the end point, I ran a marathon just because I wanted to go from somewhere west of Boston into Boston. It's like, I'm not going to run. I'm going to use whatever means I can to get there. But like you said, I got in great shape. My physiology was amazing. The I slept really well, during the entire time that I was training. So there are a whole bunch of reasons why I actually took in my environment. I saw somebody said, cognitive scientists talking about this a while ago, saying that, we are really, by flying every place in planes, we really are missing the beauty and the nature of our country, because we don't, I go from Boston to Chicago. I have no idea what's in between. I just flew over it. So it's a beautiful country. We don't see it. So it's, you know,
Nobody wants to hear me speak or tell this story, but I did go on a 2 week bike trip through Europe, and that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I saw things that you would never see flying or driving or taking a bus. I that is unreal, and that I think is right to your metaphor of what you learn along the way.
That's right. And it actually helps to construct who you are. So the fact that you remembered that, you experienced it, it became part of your, culture, your cortical knowledge base. It's like that's your experiential view of the world. Not just that, but there
Yeah.
are the things that you're exposed to help create who you are, and that's exactly what education is all about, or should be all about. It's sort of gaining that experiential knowledge. Not just, it really bothers me a lot of times when people just like, they call me and say, Professor Taglienti, I need to get an A in this course, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, that's great. But are you just getting the A because you need an A or you want a 4.0? And sometimes they'll say, oh, I have a 4.0 and now I'm going to get a 3.9 in my final GPA. And I was like, but have you learned something? And they don't seem to understand. It's not about the learning for them. It's about the grade point average. But it can't be about that. It's got to be about the experience and the knowledge. True educator, right?
So, yeah, I mean, one of the discourses when we talk about AI in education is student motivation and why they choose certain paths, whether it's to use AI for, I'll put it in super simple terms, good or bad. But when we talk about the choices they make, there are definite trade-offs when we use AI. And we're talking about this learning path and what we learn along the way. And are we okay with some of those trade-offs we make? Because there might be some downsides, but the upsides may be exponential. So where do you see those trade-offs, and are we okay as educators with what we're trading?
Um, yeah, that's a really good question, and hard to answer, but I can give you my perspective on it, because I mean, the way that I think about it, I'm really excited about what we can learn and how we can accelerate our learning by leveraging these techniques. So especially being able to, for example, assimilate, large volumes of impactful information and knowledge. I think that allows us to be able to accelerate this, the concept of, um, I either don't know a subject and I want to know, and I can do that quickly, or I want to be able to hypothesis test, and I can quickly iterate through my hypotheses by leveraging some of these AI techniques, and that makes things, it's wonderful. So now I can do exploratory analysis much more quickly as part of the learning process. And the negative side of it, as you said, is also true. So if I wanted to do something malicious, then I could figure out, how can I hack into a system more effectively, and I could find that same information. So it is a double-edged sword to an extent, and I think we have to, well, hopefully rely on our legislators and maybe the global community, writ large, to help us to control some of these use cases. So because I do think at some point it's a very powerful tool that isn't regulated yet. And I'm not saying we need to regulate things necessarily, or be draconian about what it is that we learn, but it's more of we need some kind of controls in place just so that we can perhaps tip the scales a little bit more in I'll call it the humanity first model, in terms of learning things that really help us to evolve as a species, not to, destroy ourselves, if you will.
It is so hard for me not to ask you questions about federal policy right now, but I'm going to stick. I'm
All
going
right,
to stay away
we'll
from
do another
that.
talk. We'll do another one
Yeah,
at some
right.
point.
I'm going to pose a debate to you, and
Yes.
tell me where you land on the, on this. It's the efficiency versus new capability side. One side says everything is regressing to the means. We're losing our edge thinking. There's no original thought. On the other side, a wise man once said, use the machine to be consistent so the human has the bandwidth to be profound. Where do you land on that?
Oh, I like. Well, I'm going to come in the middle, but I know you don't like that, but I will. So
Well, I mean, you can come in wherever you want, but that wise man, I pulled that quote from something you said. So
oh, that's
curious
perfect.
if you can argue
I
against yourself.
no, I like the secondary one, but I do think the first point, I think, is valid, because I mean, to an extent, we have to make sure that we sort of, I'll say, I don't want to say it's an Occam's razor problem, but it could be a little bit, where it's like, I need the answer. I need to get it, which could obviate that edge that you were describing earlier. So it's like, are people really becoming critical thinkers? And I do think, even though I said the second one, but on the first point, and I'm not arguing for it. I'm just going to interpret it. I do think that we are going to see a stratification in society, unfortunately, because I do think that we will see that there are those that are leveraging AI techniques to learn and to really enhance their ability to think at the next level. And there are those that will look at this, and I think it was Steven Pinker that said that most humans just think about or are, they're lazy because it's like we want the answer, and once we have the answer, we can go do something else or relax. So this is really just focusing on, how do I continue to drive? And I think the more we can encourage that, again, culturally, the better off we'll be as a, society. So it is an interesting dilemma or debate as we go through the process. But I do think that there will be some level of stratification, and those that have and those that don't, or those that know how to use it, those that don't know how to use. But I think the other piece is, like I said, I'm a big fan of use it as a tool. It's a co-pilot. It's something that can help you. Leverage it to make yourself more engaged in the critical thinking that's required in order to be able to be more of who you want to be. That, I think that's the bottom line. So it's, it's a great question, because you should ask other people that question too. And but it's in my mind, I think it is kind of the essence of where we need to what we need to figure out over time. Now, it can't be government regulated, because the government's not going to give you the answer to this one. It's not even, well, I guess it is to some extent. It falls on us as educators to understand how are we enabling the students of the future, or the professionals of the future, to be able to move in this direction. And interestingly, getting back to SPS, which is where I currently am working, is retraining the existing workforce, because now we have another opportunity. You don't just have to get kids when they're little, or moving through the secondary education process. It's more when they're coming back. And you were asking me earlier about the demographics of some of the people that were in our program. But we've got people that were like, I haven't been in a classroom for 20 years, and I need to understand what's going on with this AI thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We have a whole
a lot
nother
of
opportunity.
mid-career professionals.
Yeah, it's a whole new opportunity to be able to sort of have this debate, discussion, to really understand. And I say those things that we just talked about. So it's like, I do try to communicate it as a tool. And it was really sad and unfortunate, because I had talked to one of my students that just came into the program, was saying, yeah, AI just replaced my job. And I was like, oh, it's terrible. It's like, but by the same token, I was like, we will prepare you to, be enabled to, hopefully get another one.
One of the big conversations, or the headlines, talks about AI has broken education. I don't quite believe that. I think it's exposed a lot of cracks in the system that were already there, and
Sure.
it's exposing. So I'm under the impression that we have to adapt, and I I get the sense that you probably agree with that. So how do we adapt, and what does this? I want to say the classroom of the future, but I mean, with the way AI is going, the future's in 5 minutes,
Right.
But what does that look like? How are we? What does this kind of education system? What does the classroom of the future look like integrating AI?
Yeah. Let me start with answering your first question, which is really the exposure of the cracks, I think, in the system. And I agree with that initially, because I think that for the last several decades or more, the educational institution, especially secondary, or well, K-12 has gone through the same, primary education's gone through the same kinds of challenges. It's like, we understood how we would do it, and we've been doing it the same way forever. So we really haven't had any changes. So then what typically would happen was that we didn't really think out of the box too much. So as kids or adults, early adults, even adults that were already in the professional workplace, look to learn, we basically just said, well, we're going to keep doing the same thing. So we got kind of lazy, I think, over time. So the one thing I do like about AI is that it's forcing us to revisit that. So like you said, expose the cracks. The other thing I think that it is doing is it's helping us to not only rethink how it is that we engage with students, because there are several research papers and people have been producing these things, and the popularity of things like Duolingo and multimodal interfaces and interactions to learn things. Those papers have been out there, but they haven't hit the mainstream, right? So they're, the classic way of educating. It's like, I've been teaching this class for 35 years and it's been the same exact class and I'm not changing it. It's like, okay, that's great.
Hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that your students are learning the same that they were learning 35 years ago. So that's the thing I think that it's forcing us to do as educators, is to maybe become more engaged in the process of education. Um, and I think we also have to look at it from the perspective of, and again, I'm not trying to disparage any of my colleagues. I'm just trying to say that we have the ability to use it for good or use it for not so good. So we can either let it do our work for us. It can do all of our grading for us. It can create the quizzes and the course materials, and I don't really know what's going on, and I just sit there and be a proctor. That's not really a good way to use it. However, if it's I really want to teach these concepts because I know that students are going to need this in the world as it exists today. And I know the evolution, and AI can help me to understand what research material might be out there, where that evolution is, how I can best take advantage of my ability as an educator to be able to convey to them, these are the important concepts that you really do need to understand. That's golden. That is what I think will really help us to grow as a society and start taking advantage of, the more advanced parts of our, capabilities as humans to be able to learn and understand. And it's kind of the second point of the debate that you're talking about, right? Because it's a tool. Use it as a tool. Make sure that you can amplify the good things that you already know how to do, not do your work for you, if that makes sense. So.
So there are two partners in the education journey. There's the educator and the learner, and they both have the ability to use AI. And the educator can use it in various ways, such as personalized assignments and assessments. Can you, curriculum development, can you think of any great examples on the educator side? I mean, you talked about research and some ideas. Can you think of any other examples or maybe ways you've used it where an educator can do something that they were not capable of doing before in the way that they're reaching the student?
Yeah. So I think the one way to do it is, at least from my perspective. So as I go through course creation, I struggle a lot of times with, I know what I would love to teach students, but I don't have the time um, to create the materials in order to be able to do it, because the tools that we have for current education, whether it's putting something into Canvas or creating a lab or whatever, it just takes too long. So you tend to cut corners. So I'll record something, or
Mhm.
I'll make them read a bunch of papers. So I think from that perspective, what's happening is it's really driving the educational process faster. So like, I can take those things that I want to do as an educator that I believe will really change the experience for them, and be able to do it faster and more efficiently. Another thing that I'll tell you, I tell the story a lot, actually. I told it at EDUCAUSE when I was there the time, but I've started to use, especially when I do, I still do have some paper-based kinds of things, or more capstone-based projects. So like, I'll do like very intense course projects. For example, so I teach machine learning as well as some of the other things that I teach. But for students that are doing programming, like, normally you would say, you can't submit to me, whatever, 30 different Jupyter notebooks, and expect me to be able to grade them. But I can actually run a simulation or an analysis by using a generative AI tool to help me to understand what is in those particular Jupyter notebook files. So I can assimilate and assess it in a much more effective way than I would have been able to in the past. Before, I would have been like, I can't even ask students to do this because I can't grade it. I don't have the time. So it opens up that channel to be able to not only provide them to be able to do more complex things for me to test their knowledge, but I can also give them feedback. So AI techniques will say basically say, you've done these 3 things, you didn't do those 4 things. I can go in and look and I can validate. And when I do use these techniques, my students have invariably said, this is great. You've actually given me a lot of feedback in terms of what I did wrong or what I can do better or what I did right. Because historically, when I did stuff like that, what I would do is be like, great job, way to go, nice. Because, I was grading for 50 hours trying to make sure that I could get to everybody's paper. But now I can do that much more effectively, provide them with a richer experience and a richer feedback system. So I think that's it's a huge benefit for, I'll say the student, for us to be able to do that. And you asked about the both sides, right?
Well, I
AI
want
from
to
a
I want to
student
I want to I
perspective.
want to stick on the educator for a second.
Okay, yeah,
And I'm going to tie, you talk about feedback. I'm going to tie that a little bit to assessment. So feedback and assessments, uh, right or wrong, I'm going to kind of lump them together. But is there a valid use case for providing the student feedback or assessing the students with the help of artificial intelligence?
yeah, absolutely. What I have found was that I write amazingly detailed rubrics. So if I can produce these extremely detailed rubrics, I know what I'm asking the student to do is aligned with the rubric. So the expectation is that they will produce something that aligns. Now that it's easier, quote unquote, easier for an AI system to validate that they did what they were supposed to do, then I can actually go into the areas that look like they are more or less out of sync, and then focus on that. So I can review the entire. I can review the initial project. I can review what the commentary was, for example, from the AI system, based on the rubric, and then I can go through and provide my own judgment based off of what I was expecting or not. So it it makes my life easier because I'm looking at things in very specific context. I'm not just saying, well, how did the AI grade this? I'm being very specific about, I need you to grade, quote unquote, grade this according to this rubric, which is very detailed. And I also tell the students, I expect you to produce results that are very aligned with this rubric. So it kind of creates this nice matching model, where I'm using AI just to accelerate my ability to assimilate, but then I review it in order to be able to understand, was this in line with what expectations were? And if I cross-validate, I can see what's going on. So it's extremely powerful. And like I was saying earlier, students have given me feedback, like they're amazed that they thank you so much for the detailed feedback. I really do understand what I did wrong and how I can do things better. Amazing. It's really good
So
feedback.
you're using basically a two-pass system, one where the AI goes through and objectively creates some kind of assessment, and then the students are still getting the benefit where you come through after and give a subjective view, and they're still getting the benefit of your interaction because obviously we could just go have robot educators, which everybody gets the same, but that's not the value that colleges and universities provide. They want the value of getting the expert. So what the student is getting with this two-phase system is a fair judgment objectively with your expertise layered on top. Is that a summarization?
Exactly. And then, so not only do I modify those comments if they need modification, but I also then, students want to meet and talk about it, I know exactly what is going on in there. So it's
And
the
you probably have more time to
interpretation.
meet with them now.
Exactly. So then it's sort of well, explain to me why this was right or wrong. That's a better interaction than, what it used to be before. Like I said, I mean, I literally did this. It used to be like, good job. And that's the only feedback they would
Mm.
get. So then they would ask me why, and then it would take me 35 minutes to explain it. So it just makes things easier from that perspective. I don't think it cuts the corner. I think what it does is it enhances the experience.
Yeah, and I could say it's probably, well, I would guess. I mean, I've never been in that situation, but there's probably a level of objectivity and fairness because what you are assessing or grading early in the morning when you first wake up is very different than when you're tired and late and had a hard day at work and in your other job and you're coming home and having to grade more papers at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. It is the consistency. And then the other interesting thing about it is patterns. So like when you start to see patterns, um, you can come to the realization that it's like, oh, students are all doing the same kind of thing all the time.
Mhm.
Sometimes I'll be more lenient for the later students in the batch that I might be grading versus the
Uh,
beginning ones. So you really have to be careful of that.
mhm.
Whereas an AI, assessor is not going to be, it's going to be impartial to how it does that because it doesn't have any prior knowledge.
Let's bridge the gap now from educator to student. How far away are we from personalized learning at scale?
Well, I think we're kind of already there, to be honest with you. I mean, I think if you wanted to learn any topic area, you can go and do it. It's sort of like, and I'll draw the analogy to, you're not old enough to remember this, but I am, where my parents bought encyclopedias and they put them on a shelf.
Oh no, I used to have a whole shelf full of
There you go.
Encyclopedia Britannica, the World Book Encyclopedia. I'm pretty sure they are still somewhere in my parents' attic.
Right. And then, so, I mean, and it wasn't as robust, clearly, but if you wanted to learn a particular topic area, you would crack one of those open and learn something, right? It's obviously easier today, but I mean, the analogy is kind of the same. I think it's more the perspective of how many people are actually going to do that. This is getting back to this sort of I need if you read the Wake Global Contact, is that our magazine? I can't remember what the name of it is, but they just did a little introduction of my program in our Global Contact magazine, and I talked about educators being Sherpas, and I think that's exactly it. I think people need a guide. So it's like you have access to all the information you could ever want. Like I could go to Amazon and right behind me I've got like 15 books here that I'm reading. But it's like I'm learning because I want to learn. Now, if I went to I'll take my brother. Hopefully my brother doesn't listen to this podcast or he'll shoot me. But he's not interested in reading or learning about topics like this. So in some ways, people need guides, and I think that's probably true in society. So I don't think that education necessarily goes away from that perspective. I think we'll always need people to guide the process. Now it may be different. We may not be called like I may not be. I know a lot about AI. Do I know everything? Of course I don't. I can be a great guide. Today I can maybe be an expert in specific areas. Like I can provide a lot of information, and historically professors were that, right? So they were they were really the best in their field. They could communicate information because they were sort of this either experiential or well-educated academicians that understood the topic and could teach it. I don't think we have to be that level of expert in the future, but I do think we need guides to help people through the process overall. So I don't think it becomes just a go talk to your AI and learn anything you want, because I don't think people will do that. What do you think?
I've heard the terms like you said, Sherpa, coach, mentor,
Yes.
guide. That the point is not the knowledge transfer, right? The students can get that from anywhere, but the students need that guide, that coach to help them understand why this material is important, how to apply it, how to design an experience based on that material. And they need that expert who's been through the trenches, who understands and really help motivate them. And that's what a good coach does. Whether
Right.
you're talking about sports or academics, a good coach shows them not so much the path, but how to develop their own path. So I can see that the role of the educator shifts to being that coach.
Yeah. And it's dynamic, right? It's a dynamic learning process. It's not static. It's not, here's a syllabus, learn these 27 things, and then you're an expert. It's even, you know, kids that, if they want to take their GREs or whatever, they'll hire a coach to help them. The coach doesn't give them answers. The coach helps them understand techniques that they can use. So and what to look for, how to practice, how to assimilate or to adjust and adapt. That's, I think, is what ultimately happens maybe in the future. And, sometimes we get that through, you can still get that through, our normal course systems, the way that we do things today. But I think we'll see more and more truth, the source of information may come from validated AI content. Um, because I think ultimately we'll solve the problem of hallucination at some point.
So, what are some examples, maybe even just the low-hanging fruit, of the way students can properly use AI to enhance their learning?
So I'll just take one of my courses and some of the feedback that I've been getting most recently. So AI strategy and innovation. So whenever you talk about AI, you do really need to understand the underpinnings a little bit. So, the fact that this came from, or its genesis was algorithmic machine style learning is important. It's important to understand that. It's important to understand that there was a series of algorithms that have been created over the last 5 decades in order to be able to, help understand patterns and algorithmic knowledge and how machines work and operate. And all of that is founded, its underpinnings, where I was making jokes about math before, but maybe I'll be more serious now, but, probability and statistics, and really understanding linear algebra. Now, I would never expect students to understand all of those deep concepts, but if they want context, like somebody might ask, what is a logistic regression and why did my professor talk about it? So now I have this really nice way to go and figure out what it is. So I can go into ChatGPT and say, hey, tell me what logistic regression is. And oh, geez, it uses a sigmoid function. What the heck is a sigmoid function? Tell you what a sigmoid function is. So I think it can really enable either new learning for students that are looking to come up to speed on maybe more advanced concepts, or for those that maybe, oh, geez, I took probability and statistics 30 years ago. I forgot everything. So just refresh my memory. Like, what is a p-value? I have no idea, help me understand. So I think it can really be beneficial to help students that maybe are either, lacking in a particular area, that want to sort of get to the mainstream, or those that want to learn more. So it can help you to say, oh, that's really cool. I was learning these concepts about, logistic regressions. Well, what are other ways for me to be able to do similar kinds of things for fraud detection? Well, here's a couple other algorithms that I can use in order to be able to help me understand how to do that. So it can either enhance their learning, or it can help bring them up to the norm, if you will, in terms of learning processes. So I think it's really great from that perspective. And the other thing that I see, especially in these areas, is that, it's like most things. It's like if I told you, you came to me and you said, oh, I want to be an AI expert. And I might say, okay, Ryan, guess what? I need you to go take a linear algebra course, and then I need you to take a prob and stats course, and and come back to me in a year when you've done all that, and you're gonna be like, yeah, I don't think
I've
so.
already done that once. I'd rather not do it
Right?
again.
Exactly. So it's literally gonna be one of these things where it's like, let's get into the material. And when I don't know something, I have a convenient mechanism to go either, and easily, like a heuristic. Give me the high level understanding. I don't need the details, but so that I can progress forward and understand the concept more effectively. I think we're in that world today, and I think it's amazing, to be honest with you. So like there are many, many things that I have learned over the course of the last, several months, or maybe even a year, where it's like I didn't understand a concept and I just went to ChatGPT or whatever and learned it. And it's like, you do have to have a good solid background to be able to understand it, but you can get there quickly. So it is pretty amazing. I think that'll maybe be the future.
Cannot believe how fast our time has gone. And
Holy
since we
crap.
are not
Sorry.
the Dwarkesh podcast or Lex Friedman,
I
we're
know.
not going to go
3 hours
multiple
later.
hours here. So we do need to cut our time short. But I
Okay,
would like to ask you one final question.
sure.
You've been an educator for many years. You are highly integral to developing this new program at Wake Forest. Give some advice to other educators out there, what they need to be prepared for. Not necessarily what they need to do in the classroom, but how they need to start approaching and thinking about educating with AI.
Yes, it's a great question, because I think it doesn't really fly counter to what we have learned as educators. And, being a doctor of education, I understand the pedagogical models and, how we should teach and educate. And there are many of them, but I do think that what we really should be prepared for as educators is really understanding how to adapt. So making sure that we can understand, if we know that our ultimate objective is education and I'll call it transfer learning of knowledge to our students, how can we do that most effectively? And AI techniques can provide a lot of value. It's not going to substitute our ability to understand the techniques for learning, but it can help to support enhancing those techniques. And I think we have to think about it from that perspective. And I would sort of use maybe a business term to help my colleagues understand what I'm talking about. It's a little bit of first principles of design. It's like we've done things historically in a specific way, and they've worked, but that was because the technological limits of what we could do were very stringent. We had learning management systems, but even before that, we didn't even have digital textbooks. We only had physical textbooks. So things have changed over time, but not that drastically. We now have a drastic change, which allows us to be able to really rethink how we would love to be able to go back to true pedagogical learning and really kind of blow it all up and think about first principles. And I would say that, not that we can't just do this day one, but think about sort of where we would want to go ultimately. And, it's a baby steps, but, as technology increases in this area, this was from my EDUCAUSE presentation, by the way, there's a gap between technology and the innovation in education, and it just keeps getting bigger. And so we have to make sure that we close the gap by being more innovative in the way that we think about true education of our students by leveraging some of the technology that's available today, not just relying on the old ways of the way that we used to educate, because even students aren't going to want that anymore in the future because they won't be prepared to enter the workforce.
It's fascinating advice. And for people who want to find out more about what you say about education or federal policy, you can find Carm all over the internet. Or I assume he'd very much appreciate you coming up and shaking his hand at EDUCAUSE this year in, I believe, Denver, right? Is it Denver?
I believe so.
I think so. So yeah, come up and say hi to Carm. Carm, thank you so much for this. This has been very enlightening and very fun. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. It was my pleasure and great speaking with you, and great conversation.
Thanks again to our guest, and thanks for listening to the Deeks.ai podcast. Please continue to follow the AI discussion by subscribing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you have any comments, questions, or would like to join the discussion, please email us at deeks.ai@wfu.edu.